Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the PolyMarks podcast. I'm your host, Joel McLeish, here with the other McLeish brothers. Matt McLeish over here.
Hey, how's it going?
Andrew McLeish is here as well.
Hey.
We are here for our very first episode, and we are going to be discussing generally the Polymarket. Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Polymarket is and why we're here talking about it?
Yeah, well, Polymarket's pretty recent thing. Just got founded in 2020, so all within the last 5 years, it's become quite a big thing. It's just generally the ability to bet on almost anything. Markets can be on politics, economy, sports, world events, craziest things you can think of. And anybody can take either side of a bet if they think it's going to go whichever way it might go. And when the bets pay off, then make a little money. When we lose, though, that's what makes us the marks in Polymarket, because we're definitely not going to win the majority of our bets.
Yeah, the marks in Polymark here is the guys losing bets here. But what was the thing that brought you guys to Polymarket? What was the first bet that you kind of got exposed to, got interested in Polymarket?
Sure. Yeah, we actually did a few. We actually did a little bit of betting with the Canadian election.
Lost there.
Lost there.
Wait, you guys were going on the Conservatives?
Avoid PL for a minute there. Carney came through. But in general, I think we see lots of value, lots of opportunity, where if you're more tuned to some of these markets than the general population, I think there is some opportunity to outperform. And that's kind of the plan here. We're all putting some money in. We're going to discuss our bets publicly. We're going to let people know about it.
Yeah.
And we think we can make money on Polymarket. And that's the big test and goal of this podcast, is to see if we can do it. So we're going to share our bets with everybody. We're going to discuss them amongst the people, amongst ourselves. And then our markets and our portfolios will be open to the world to see, to track, and to see if we can actually outperform and actually make some money doing this.
And for our one listener out there, if you have any bets that you think are interesting, hi, Grandma. We're going to show her about this later. We could probably do like hashtag, PMP bets. And if you want to suggest interesting markets that you want us to look at in future episodes, we could look at that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. Let's start with a little bit of lore for our first big win, which was Andrew predicting the Trump striking the Iran nuclear facilities. You want to tell us a little about that, Andrew?
Nostradamus. So
Yeah.
Well, around my cubicle at work, a lot of people were impressed when I came in on Monday with a pretty big smile on my face, because I had told them all I was going to make that bet. Well, as the Twitter meme, unfortunately, I can't say X.com. But
It's X. I refuse
to say
it's still Twitter. It's hard to say it's something else.
As the Twitter meme goes, well, that war between Iran and Israel was going on. I was monitoring the situation, but there was a whole bunch of tankers that got moved from the States to the European theater the weekend before. It sure seemed to me obvious that the military was getting some strategic elements in place to do something big. And it just made sense to me that Israel wouldn't have gone through that gigantic air war, taking out all the Iranian air defenses, striking all the military brass without the ability to strike Fordo. And they didn't have the ability to do that themselves. It only made sense to me that they had gotten some sort of explicit or implicit promise from Trump before doing that they were going to take out the nuclear enrichment facilities at Fordo. I texted Matt on the Friday saying, hey, I really think this is going to happen this weekend. It made sense to do it, in my mind, right after the markets closed, so they had as much time to recover and for the dust literally to settle before the markets opened on Monday. We ended up betting on both the Friday and the Saturday.
20-1 for Friday, 10-1 for Saturday.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being a pretty good win for us, because we got Saturday. In retrospect, we think we could have.
Yeah, we got a little greedy betting on the Friday, but it ended up happening on the Saturday. probably one of the crazier weekends talking with my brother about how we were going to spend our big winnings.
Really interesting, guys. What that himself?
Yeah.
Animation.
I love
was
it.
excited to some of these,
Yeah.
first bets. These were
guys.
just Andrew and Matt. Joe.
That's why we're only down, and we're going to be sharing our bets with the world. So maybe we should get into it. And I have the first bet that I really like that's actively on Polymarket, and then that is, will Trump or the American government lower tariffs on Canada before December 31st? And I am strongly in the no position. Joel, pull that up for us right now. Joel, I think it's around 19 cents, or about essentially what it's saying is 19% to win that bet. So 5-1 on our money if it goes my way. I think the chance that there's no action or no change is probably closer to 50-50 in my mind. So I think there's some really good value as far as predicting that, just with the little bit of headbutting and fighting going on between what seems Trump and Carney, where they're not even talking, they're not even in negotiations. We know that China and Canada were the only two countries that imposed counter tariffs on America. And I think that Trump's going to try to make of this a little bit of a sticking point, example, exactly. Say, you be a dick to us, we're going to go super hard. So
Now, I have pulled up the bet here, Matt. I don't know if you want to go into the specifics of the rules on how this one is going to be resolved.
Which is, of course, always important when you're thinking about making a bet on Polymarket, is to look up exactly how any given market will resolve and what the
because each bet will have different rules, right? And sometimes there's multiple bets, your sub bets. Kind of, how would you describe because you may have different dates for example.
Sure, yeah, exactly. So like Andrew said, for the U.S. bombing of Iran, there was different dates and different marks you could get for those different dates as far as how much you would pay.
So you're betting yes or no whether that strike would happen by that particular date, and each one would resolve. Midnight strike hasn't happened, then that bet resolves to a no, and then but you guys got lucky on that one day, it resolved to a yes because it would having those strikes.
Exactly. And so this one, we can go into a little bit of details, but basically it's just if there's any changes to the current situation.
What is the current tariff situation?
The current tariff situation is they've implemented a 35% on non-CUMSA, or basically non-already prearranged North American trade agreement goods, as well as 50% on aluminum and steel, I believe. And so these are major Canadian markets: the steel in Hamilton and Ontario, the aluminum in Quebec. And we know Canada's hurting right now. The jobs report just came out that was not good. I think they lost 40,000 jobs across Canada. So I think Canada's probably already in the precipice of a recession, which might mean they try to make a deal to make things happen. But I think much more likely is that they just keep kind of putting their head in the sand. They're trying to do these, essentially by across province agreements. But I just don't think a lot is happening. So, okay, go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I was going to say, especially when the concessions that Trump is looking for are the things that I think Carney is least likely to move on. For example, our dairy cartel, the getting rid of the Digital Safety Act.
Right. They're trying to
block us from getting new
taxes on these tech companies. Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of getting to this is kind of the bigger fun discussion. What do you guys think Trump wants with Canada? Because that's where I honestly end up getting a little confused, because I mean, I don't think he actually plans on making us a state. I also don't think he really cares about dairy. It's a tiny market. You know what I mean? Banks having access to Canada might be somewhat legitimate. I'm sure they have strong lobbying arms to try to tackle this huge market. But I really don't have a good sense of what this actually might look like in the future. I'm not sure what the end game is in either Trump or Carney's mind. And that's another big reason why I think nothing's getting settled, because I do think he does have bigger ambitions for Canada, probably for precious metals and resources, part of a larger defense plan. It has to get figured out, but I just don't know what it looks like. Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, just there's lots of interesting stuff going on there, obviously, and thanks for kind of laying that out. I did just want to kind of touch specifically on what the actual triggering rules for the bet would be, and why you don't, why you think one way or the other here. So it says the market will resolve to yes. So you have the yes or no option on these bets. Will resolve to yes if Donald Trump signs any federal legislation or performs any executive action that lowers, pauses, delays, or removes any tariffs on imports from Canada by December 31st, 2025. Otherwise, this market will resolve to no. So just so maybe I can understand here, make sure everybody else understands is we have the 35% tariff now. And essentially, if there's anything that Trump does, right, whether it's a small lowering on a particular market, that would technically resolve to a yes. It does look like there is some there's a little additional context here where they're talking about whether there is some dispute on this market. So yeah, what do you think about whether or not we'll ever get to that yes, Matt? And why do you think there's disputes around whether this market resolves to a yes?
I'm not really sure what I assume there's so many different products and so much different type of tariffs. There's going to be all these ongoing, disputes. I think what they're saying those don't pertain to what the bigger things are. Is we know when Trump essentially or Lutnick or one of the major players makes an announcement about tariffs, and they've done this
when he brings out the big
he brings out the big four, but we know he just did this again with China. He just extended another 90 days with China because obviously they're in the middle of some type of large negotiation. And so they're saying, okay, we're not going to do anything until we get this resolved. Canada has no such luck, right? We know that August 1st, he implemented just like he said he would. 35% is kind of one of the higher watermarks as far as numbers. And
Canada's essentially being punished, right, compared to some of the other countries because they did the reciprocal or counter tariffs against Canada.
We're certainly assuming that that's what it looks like, but you also have to realize most other major markets already have made a deal, right? We're talking about Japan, Europe, UK, right? And so in many ways, you thought Canada and Mexico would probably go first, right? But obviously,
being the neighbors,
and we know they've been working, at least discussing.
And speaking of Mexico,
sure,
they got a pause. They got a
pause, and not only that, reporting was that Carney reached out to the Mexican president and tried to make a bilateral deal, try to cut out. And she said, no, we're not doing that. We're focused on making a deal with America. We don't really care. They choose America. What? I mean, what? You guys are good at shit. No, well, that's about it. And so, I just think we're in a really tricky spot, to be honest. As a Canadian, it doesn't feel great. And I tried to, obviously, the whole point of this Polymarket thing is you try to be a little dispassionate about these things and just be honest about what the results are. I think there's just a really good chance that there is no move. He makes an example of us. A bunch of other countries cut deals, get low tariffs. I think he wants to end up, the 10 to 20% on most of these big markets. And I think we might stay here until he gets, who knows what he wants. That's the one thing I don't really know. I don't know what the end game is, but I don't think it's going to be resolved shortly.
But I think the great thing about betting on a market such as this, and sure, you could lose tomorrow.
Sure.
Well, you could have a deal tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the longer this goes, the more your bet's going to increase.
Right.
And you have the ability to sell anytime.
Yeah. I was honestly really surprised by that number because I did look at there was a Polymarket market right before the August ones, whether they were going to pause or lower. And it was very high on the no, because at that point, most people assumed there wasn't going to be a deal. These things were going to be implemented. But then for the 31st, at the time I first looked at it, I think it was in the mid 90s. Right. And so people were saying, oh, this happened, but for sure by the end of the year, they'll have a deal. And I'm like, I just don't think that's the case. Or at least I don't think that's the most so likely. I mean, maybe it's 50-50 or whatever, like I said. But the idea that we're getting essentially 5-1, I think is pretty good.
So if I were to make it, I mean, it looks great out here. Am I still able to make this bet?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, if I were to make this bet right now, what would be my return if we win on this?
So yeah, click $100 right there. We'll kind of show how this works.
Okay.
And in the future, I'm sure we'll put this in the screen.
Yeah.
Right. So if you bet 100, you're gonna get.
He cashes out 500 still. Yeah. So I mean that seems like again, it's And you're right, Andrew, because it's like, yeah, the closer we get, it's like, unless that number's, it will you sort of obviously gradually resolve to no naturally on the 30th.
I mean, if we're in December and it hasn't been passed,
it will be
pretty confident it's not going to get resolved over Christmas.
Well, I think, I presumably the price will be,
exactly
80 cents to buy a no. And then instead of, when you spend $100 getting 500, you're getting maybe $120, right? Or $130,
exactly.
which Joel has made some silly conservative bets where that's all he would get back. So those are apparently not the interesting bets, folks. So we should look for the other.
Carney strikes a deal tomorrow.
So you're saying I should buy the small number? Okay, small number, good. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So I kind of wrap this up, but I like the bet. I have the $1,000 portfolio. I put $100 on this bet because
I've also took some action on.
I am thinking I will take action on this because it sounds. I get your point that I think there's not a lot of leverage, not a lot it can do. There's obviously, like you say, Andrew could resolve and we're wrong tomorrow, but for a 5-to-1 bet, it seems like a good upside. That's very interesting. The other bet that's sort of adjacent that we kind of wanted to talk about was the bet here that Andrew did, which was dealing with whether or not there would be a recession in 2025. Andrew, why don't you, I can pull that bet up if you haven't pulled it up already, but give us a little bit of an idea on what this one is, why you think it's going to go the way it is, or what your bet was, and give us a little bit about what the odds are, why it's an interesting bet.
Yeah, so this is a bet I bought earlier this week. It was right around the time that just after the jobs numbers had come out with that major revision on both June and July, I want to say, where 5-6 of the jobs that they said they had created in July all of a sudden get revised down 60, 70, 80% or whatever it was. Which caused Trump to fire the poor lady who runs the numbers collection bureau. What's the number at now, Joel?
So I'm just looking at it now. Currently, to buy a yes on this one is only 13 cents because it's people are indicating obviously that people think the economy is on the up and up, but Andrew thinks it's a little bit inflated there. So if you were to spend $100 right now, if I were to make a bet, I could get $769 at the end of the year.
Okay, so let's break this down for a little bit, Andrew, on a technical standpoint. Yes, I see here that at one point this bet was over 60%.
Right after the Trump's Liberation Day.
Yeah,
stock
in April and in May, they both peaked over 60%, but the big concern, as far as I understand it, is we need 2 quarters of negative growth, right, to be in a recession officially. Have we had one yet?
Well, I don't think that the reporting on this will be announced by the Fed. I believe it's the Fed is one of the resolvers.
Okay.
So they have not announced their second quarter numbers yet. I don't believe. I could be mistaken on that.
Well, I think it's pretty important before we make this bet, because if the first 2 quarters are already done and resolved, now you're counting on the last 2 quarters to both be negative is the only way the bet essentially goes through. Now, obviously, whatever they might have announced about the financial quarter, the fiscal quarter that just finished in July, whatever they may have announced so far, and again, my understanding is they have not announced anything, especially with the Fed meeting coming up. But what are the I must be some preliminary numbers.
This is interesting though, because I'll read here a little bit about the rules again, just so we can see kind of how these markets resolve. It's still something I'm not super familiar with, and something that Andrew wants to discuss a little more detail about a different story. But it says the market will resolve to yes if either of the following conditions are met. Either 1, the National Bureau of Economic Research publicly announces that a recession has occurred in the United States at any point in 2025, with the announcement made by December 31st, 2025. So just as a point on what Matt was talking about, is the quarter finish, those 2 quarters finish on December 31st. So they can't have made, it's impossible for them to make the
I had not thought of that.
but let's look at the second one here. So the second possibility is the seasonally adjusted annualized percent change in quarterly U.S. real GDP from the previous quarter is less than 0.0 for 2 consecutive quarters between Q 2024 and Q4 2025 inclusive, as reported by the Economic Bureau of Analysis. Otherwise, this market will result.
So it will go to the Q 2025, Q4.
Right. So once they announce the Q4 2025 numbers, which won't be until after December 30th.
But you're waiting on the Bureau of Economic Analysis to make that final.
But we must have at least some preliminary reporting on the second quarter. What does it say?
I think I remember seeing Tesla didn't have some great numbers. I think some people have announced their numbers.
Well, I think 82% of companies in the S&P 500 have gone over their marks.
Right. Yeah.
But that is a big indicator that at least from the large company standpoints, they're seeing 5. But I'm not talking about on an individual stock basis. There must be. Well, like here we go. See right here, we can pull up US GDP growth in quarter 2. What is that? Pull that one up, Joel.
That's another bit here. So this is it looks like it's essentially resolved as a no. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh no, that's under 3.5. That's what it said. That's confusing. Sorry about that. Look at this. Negative GDP. Oh, yeah, it's 10%. And what I'm trying to say is we should have a somewhat accurate understanding of what happened in Q2 of this year already. And I think it's important to understand
my bet is not that necessarily. Again, this is a bit of a vibe bet for me. I'm not gonna lie, and I'm taking a bit of a flyer at 13%.
Well, I mean, obviously, usually the ones with the big odds are going to be a flyer, right? That you're going against the market, right? That's what Polymarket is. Most of the people in the indicators are aiming for the opposite conclusion.
No, obviously it's a high percent. I mean, you're getting 7 to 1. I think, essentially you have a couple of chances, right? You can say that either Q2 will actually be negative, and then you have
maybe to revise,
and then you might, or you have to get Q3 and Q4, which we're just in the middle of now.
But it has to be through the BEA numbers because it's the other organization will not announce a recession if it's just 2 quarters before the end of the year, right? Because the quarter would.
Yeah, exactly. Right, they're not going to announce. So yeah, exactly. So they have a chance to do if it's Q2 and Q3. The real reality is that the only way Anders can win this bet is if Q3 and Q4 are actually negative, assuming the data on Q2 is positive.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why I think this has not a good chance of happening. It's not likely to happen.
Sure,
certainly not by the numbers or by the financial analysts. And I'm gonna shout out to a podcast I really like, a guy named Peter Zion, who does a great quick hitter pod. I think everybody should listen to it. But he's been predicting a recession to hit the U.S. for quite some time now, as soon as Trump announced all those tariffs. And it's a situation where all the things that a lot of importers, suppliers, distributors, a lot of people ordered a whole lot of inventory right before those tariffs kicked in. And
to sort of delay when those increased costs may come in.
Yeah, get ahead of it.
Yeah. And it's something that I experienced personally in my job. I'm a wire and cable, or I work for a wire and cable distributor. And if anyone needs electrical wire and cable in Western Canada, holler at your boy. But I've had dozens, if not hundreds, of conversations with business owners that order in the hundreds of dollars and people who order in the hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cable, talking about upcoming projects that they needed cable for, and they wanted to get things ordered before the tariffs hit. And I think a lot of business owners, and Peter Zion talks about this, ordered a lot of their material from their suppliers overseas. They were able to fill their warehouses, but just like we saw with all the ships not coming to the Western ports from China, all that inventory is going to dry up, And then in order to get it replenished, they're going to have to pay outlandish rates that they weren't paying beforehand. And that's going to make prices go up. That's going to make people not pull the trigger on decisions they would have made otherwise. And those tariffs are going to kill people's ability to even project where their costs will be 2 months, 10 months, 2 years down the road, which just makes people sit on their hands and say, maybe I'll just wait things out and see where things are going to go. It's a bit of a vibes-based bet. I don't have a lot of great numbers to back it up, but I think it's fairly easy to say that we are in a bit of an economic bubble right now, stimulated by cash that they've been pumping in the economy since 2020. I feel like there has to be an endpoint somewhere, and the only thing propping up the economy, I think we can all agree right now, is the AI bubble.
Yeah. I mean, lots of stuff we talked about there. I think, well, especially if they get into a landing zone, right, which we've talked about, which is going to be 10 to maybe 20%. I assume like China is the big one. If they get into a zone that's 10 or 15%, I just think
you're talking about a tariff zone.
Tariff zone, yeah. I think most of these suppliers are going to eat a large chunk of that to stay competitive. I think we have seen dramatic changes in the announcements alone of stuff that's going to happen in America. I mean, I just don't think, it's what concerns me as a Canadian is that we have no investment, right? And I think the real success of Trump's tariffs is that not just that he's going to be making some amount of tariff revenue, but he has got these companies to commit, to doing huge purchases, both in the Middle East, and Saudis and all those guys. Europe's buying a ton, and we have to, I think, Japan also. So these guys are getting massive investments into America. I just find it very hard to believe that it's not going to be stimulatory in the long run as well as the short run.
Yeah, or at least to delay a recession. Because I think that's the biggest killer to your bet, Andrew. And you talked about it a little bit, right? Is like, hey, maybe we were having a delay on when we're feeling those impacts of the tariffs because people have been able to bring in inventory, right? But I think there's also another potential delay. And like Matt, the countervailing effect is there's more money being pumped in. But also, I think the tariffs take a while to work through, right? It's like widget company orders copper wire and now they're having to pay the tariffs. But that finished wire, when it makes its way into my drone or my cell phone or whatever it is, it's probably gone through back and forth for more tariffs and more delays, right? So I don't think the consumer is necessarily feeling those tariff impacts yet. Maybe soon, right? Obviously, but again, is it going to be soon enough to get those 2 negative quarters right before the end of the year? I think
and I think that's ultimately the question that is to be answered with my bet is that, hey, am I going to be vibes right? Like,
we're vibing, baby. It's all nice
in December. Like, is everybody going to be like, oh yeah, we're for sure in a recession? But maybe just like Biden somehow managed to avoid saying they had a recession back in whatever it was.
Right, but correct me if I'm wrong. This market would have resolved to a yes.
I believe so.
Despite the revised numbers,
despite the spin,
right? The numbers are the numbers. If you have negative GDP growth for 2, that results this thing. But I do think it is pretty important to say, Andrew, you are betting against the trend. This market since May is basically straight down from 60 all the way down to 10% now.
But obviously, over enough time, it has to resolve to know at a certain point.
Exactly, and that's what I feel like. I said I feel like we're already on the cusp because G2 numbers, at least the major banks and all these things, I'm sure have a good fleshing out, if not actual numbers on what happened in Q2. So now you're really left with Q3 and Q4, and I just think with those announcements, you're bucking against the trend.
But even this percolator bet that you kind of pointed to, Matt, is whether there will be negative GDP growth in 2025 at all, and that's going towards,
which I think is
you're getting better odds on that one, and it's probably a more likely bet that you could.
That is
interesting.
Yeah, that is probably better.
There's possible, right? You just
maybe I'll sell my shares.
Switch it over to this guy.
Because that is a more
No, exactly. That's a much more reasonable one because you can hit Q3 or Q4. Just have to hit one. But yeah.
And then, of course, is the great thing about Polymarket that I happen to like is that, hey, if you make a bet that you don't like, you're not locked in. You can always sell your shares as long as the market hasn't resolved. And sure, I might take a loss, but if I decide that, hey, things aren't looking up in a month or two, I might bite the bullet.
Yeah. And those are essentially
something
like
else.
shares you're saying, Andrew, right? Is you're selling them at the current asking price to new buyers coming in.
Are you already down on that bet a little bit for a few days ago?
I have to pull up my phone to check. Probably.
Yeah. Okay, well, those are kind of the two big bets we wanted to talk about this week. Sounds like everyone might like Matt's bet a little bit more than Andrew's bet, but that's okay. There's no winners and losers until they resolve. Then we'll figure out who the actual winners and losers, and that's what we like about this because, you know, a little background here, we like to argue amongst a bunch of ourselves. It's kind of the way our family operates. And now we have the timestamps and the winners to kind of see who's right and wrong.
Yeah, and so that's the idea of the PolyMarks podcast here. We've got all of our own ats on Polymarket. I'm at PMP Joel, so you can go and check out my profile, see my shitty wimpy bets from the first episode here, or you can check out PMP Matt to see Matt's bets and the bets he's made so far this week. Andrew is PMP Andrew, as you might expect, and he's also got some side bets he's made that we might talk about next week. And he's also got a sports bet. Andrew, you're betting on Arsenal to go all the way here. Our European UK fans are really up in arms.
Yeah, all the Premier League.
All 50.
Yeah. Well, this is my homework bet. I've been a long-time fan of Arsenal, ever since, probably 2006. If you guys remember playing that FIFA, that was a good year. But,
guys, we should get Xbox or something. We should get FIFA at Mom and Dad's house so we can play some in-person FIFA.
But yeah, I think they might have got their man this year in Victor Gyökeres, the Swedish striker. He's taken the famous number 14 jersey that Thierry Henry wore. If you guys remember the
Poetic, I love it.
from FIFA 06, the Thierry Henry as he lifts
Thierry Henry.
football past.
That was the one off the chest where he does the bicycle sort of over into that back top right.
It wasn't a bicycle, but he takes it off the chest midair, kind of spins on it from the 18-yard box against, I forget who, maybe Man U, I want to say. Yeah. Incredible
soccer stuff. Matt's sitting over here with a glazed look in his eyes.
Open up, baby. Okay, let's wrap this up. I do think Andrew wanted to talk a little bit about kind of some of the mechanisms from Polymarket quick.
Yeah.
And one specific bet he tried to kind of backdoor his way into a big win, and it didn't work. Talk about a little about Andrew so we can kind of understand a little bit.
Yeah, because I've never really understood, who resolves this. Or is it users that are resolving the market? Is it these organizations, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's important to understand with Polymarket that there's no book. There's no MGM Grand who's booking these bets. There's no one really setting the odds. The market opens and, maybe at 50% either way. And then whichever way the volume goes, the odds go in the opposite direction. So if more people buy yes, then there's going to be more return on buying a no. And similar to the market that we had bet on where the U.S. hit the Iranian nuclear facilities, after a recent border conflict kind of popped off between Thailand and Cambodia.
It's always popping up on my feed.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm getting something from my money of the mountains.
Cambodian discourse on Twitter these days.
Mountains of Cambodia.
Yeah.
Probably not.
There's got to be. Yeah. I mean, borders are always centered around mountains.
Borders are jungles,
But there was a market as to whether or not Thailand would retaliate by hitting somewhere inside Cambodia with either bombs, drones, rockets, what have you. There were some specific conditions, and there were some specific things that were excluded, like small arms fire, artillery wouldn't count. And then these strikes had to happen within a specific time period. And it was blah, blah, blah.
Was it Thailand struck Cambodia by August 1st? Was it one of those types of?
It was, but it was for July 26th was the market. And I had noticed this market about a week later, it still hadn't resolved. And the reason is there was a disputed outcome as to whether or not Thailand had in fact struck Cambodia during the time frame specified by this specific market. And the issue is that after Thailand had announced that it had hit Cambodia, the market had gone to basically 99. And everyone thought that it would resolve to a yes for sure. But after the dust settled, literally, it was discovered by some of the users, some of the bettors on Polymarket, that in fact the strikes had not taken place during the window specified by the market, and it in fact had happened in the hour previous to the market opening. And as such, the market should resolve to no. But by that time, there was a lot of money that had already been bet, and people were set to win a lot of money, seeing that as the odds had shot to 99% to resolve as a yes. Now, at that point, I might have put a small bet on those numbers myself, because based on my own research and based
on a yes,
I bet on a no. Okay, at 1% odds, looking at 100-to-1 payout. If for some reason the market resolved to no, as I thought, based on my own research and based on the research of other users of Polymarket, it should have resolved to no.
Okay.
But the issue is that Polymarket, because it doesn't have a central authority, there's nobody to appeal to, there's no judge sitting in, as we can decide which way there's nowhere for the buck to stop. And then the only thing that does resolve these markets is a site called UMA.xyz. And basically, they have tokens that you're allowed to stake money on. Your money will stay staked for a 7-day period minimally. And with those tokens, you can bet on how to resolve the market. So the issue with a system that's set up this way is obviously people who have a lot of money invested in a certain market will decide how they want it to resolve simply by putting enough money into the UMA site to
say that this is true,
to say that XYZ happened or not.
Right, because those people with the tokens, and again, we're getting a little into the weeds with crypto stuff here, but those people buy the UMA tokens, and they're the ones who get to sort of weigh in on the truth of a particular thing.
Correct. So in this particular market, despite there being good evidence that it should have resolved to no, I decided I would investigate this a little bit myself, put a little money into voting tokens, and try and get this market to resolve to a no, like I thought it should. Well, more than double the amount of money that was bet on the Polymarket was used in UMA tokens to decide how this market would resolve. So the people who are supposed to be the resolvers, the impartial judges, all voted 99% to resolve it to yes, and bet more money to resolve it, or stake more money to resolve it, than the money that was even bet on the market.
Some weird leverage thing going on there.
Yeah. So basically it boils down to is that anybody who wants to resolve a market the way they want to resolve it simply has to spend enough money in UMA tokens to make it happen.
So something that's sort of verifiably should be resolved to yes, small volume market. I could go in there if I had a bunch of UMA tokens and try and manipulate the outcome, even if it makes no sense. It's something that we could very easily prove as long as I had enough UMA tokens.
Correct.
Is that what we're saying?
And there was a similar dispute not that long ago when Zelensky went to the White House, and there was a market as to what he was going to wear to meet with President Trump. And there was, different options, suit, military costume. And he kind of split the difference a little bit and wore a bit of a military style suit
under a suit jacket.
Yeah. And that's a situation where it's like, well, in a democratized way, it kind of makes sense that this is the only way that a market
people are winning on both sides.
Yeah. But in a situation where it's black and white, that it sure seems, by all accounts to me, that Thailand did not, in fact, strike Cambodia within the time frame. But in fact, it was an hour before the market even opened.
But then the news came in during the window, essentially, right? And that's what threw everything up.
So in a situation where it's as black as white as that, it can't be something that can purely be decided by a vote. Because if there's no greater authority than who has money at risk in a market, well, then obviously whoever has the most money invested in a certain outcome will decide that outcome.
What do you think, Matt? What are your thoughts as the resident bettor here?
No, I mean, it's a little bit scary. It makes me think it's one of the reasons why I wouldn't want to do huge amounts of betting on this thing. But I do think, especially some of these ones that are a little bit smaller markets that have weirder, hard to understand sometimes timing and policies, it is important to understand these things because
and arbitrary,
yeah. And so,
judgment based. Like, how can you, who's to say whether a suit is military themed or what have
sure. And Polymarket does try their best, or the people that create the things try their best to be as clear as possible. But you see these little things pop up in almost every one where someone says, we were talking about Epstein and Trump stuff earlier. It's like, oh, have files been released or whatever. And you try to get down the details. So it's definitely nice to have bets. Even the bet I suggested tonight, it would be interesting if someone else was to say, something about somehow that tariffs changed on Canada, but it wasn't officially from Trump or the White House, how that might, come out. And yeah, it does get a little bit weird.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, there was some other bets I was looking at where it is interesting to think about how it gets resolved and whether or not that can be manipulated. So definitely to our viewers out there, our listeners, I suppose.
This is not financial advice.
Not financial advice. We are
read the rules very carefully. This is not legal advice or financial advice.
But at the end of the day, it is a lot of fun. We do think it's pretty cool that you can bet on anything. We'll wrap up the first episode here. You guys can track us on all our different portfolios. We will lock in our bets here. And what do we got? Our Instagram is PMP Podcast.
Polymark
Podcast
Pod on Instagram. I'll probably set something up on Twitter.
It's something gram, kids.
It's all about the gram. Get on X,
and the plan is to drop one of these once a week. Updated bets, new ideas. Follow along, and see if we can make this a hit.
All
right, guys. First pod, we're out. Thanks.
Bye-bye.